Hi, this is James Shook. I'm host of Webcomics Reviews and Interviews. Today we're with Editor-in-Chief Michael Sun of Tapas. So sit back, relax, and let the Geek Fest begin.
Cool. So, yeah, my name is Michael Sun, Editor-in-Chief at Tapas Media. Tapas is a open publishing platform for webcomics and web novels. We're home to over 50,000 creators and over 70,000 original stories. Our goal is to make sure that there's something out there for everyone and that we're telling stories that you can't find anywhere else in the world.
Cool. Do you guys have any limitations on genres or anything like that?
No, I mean, I think that, because it's webcomics and web novels and, these are stories that people want to tell regardless of any situation, right? Like, if they're doing it for fun or if they're trying to do this professionally, they're trying to explore some type of truth that speaks to some passion that they have. And so we're not really restricted by genre per se. I mean, we do have like a set of genres that we have on platform, but honestly, you can tell any story that you want to tell.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed there was a lot of interesting stuff there. Right? It just looked like there was an interesting smattering, especially it looks like it had a lot of stuff with an a manga feel to it.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think a lot of the creators on Tapas have been in some way influenced by manga or anime. I mean, me personally, like I grew up reading manga, watching anime, so I think that this is kind of like their take on that artistic style. I think you'll see like a wide variety of different art styles in general, but yeah, I would say a lot of them are influenced in some way or another with their exposure to anime and manga.
When it comes down to it, how would you describe Tapas?
How would I describe tapas? That's a great question. I mean, tapas derives from the term, or from the original Spanish word tapas, which is like, bite-sized snacks. So as we approach storytelling, we really want to approach it as like bite-sized stories on the go. So I would say that a lot of the comics and web novels on platform are a lot shorter when it comes to each episode. We really want to be a home for readers and creators for them to spend anywhere from like 3 to like 10 minutes per day just trying to explore new stories.
Okay. Basically, is it more like an app type situation, or is it more of an app type situation or an actual website? Where's the emphasis on?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, we started off primarily as a web platform, and then we introduced our mobile apps into the market a few years ago. And then we just saw that there's just so many readers out there that wanted to explore stories via the mobile app. When you're exploring traditional comics, you kind of have to either go to like a traditional brick and mortar comic shop, or you can potentially go to Barnes and Noble. When a comic is collected in a trade, you can order it off of Amazon. But there is like kind of more hurdles to go through if you want to like have access to those stories. And for us, we wanted to reframe that discussion. So we wanted to make stories, whether it's a webcomic or web novel, as easily accessible as possible. So putting it where people already are. So many people use cell phones and use a ton of apps. So why not just present comics in an easily digestible format, such as an app reader?
Okay. Yeah, because I've noticed you have the same basic format that Webtoons uses. So.
Yeah, it's a very popular format, I would say, in Asia already. I think we're just seeing it really take off in like the Western market.
Yeah, I mean, when I was looking at Tapas, I noticed that basically it was broken down by more of a frame-by-frame type situation rather than a full page.
Yeah, it depends on like series per series. Because we're like an open platform, creators are able to publish in whatever format they want. So something like a Cassandra Comics will have maybe 4 to 5 panels per episode, and something like let me think, like something like a Magical Boy might have anywhere from like 40 to 50 panels per episode. So it varies depending on what you're reading and what you're experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely leads itself to more of a cinematic feel for it.
For sure.
So, all right, for basically like webcomic creator, what would be the advantage of going with Tapas versus somebody else?
That's a good question. I mean, even though I am part of the Tapas team, I still strongly recommend that every creator explore every possible platform out there. Whether it's like a Tapas, or even something like a DeviantArt. I don't know if that's still as relevant, but like Twitter, Instagram for sure. Just to really figure out like what platform makes the most sense for them. In terms of like what advantages Tapas presents, we're an open publishing platform where anyone can succeed. All of our monetization tools help support the creative endeavor, are free for everyone to use, like whether it's like the ad revenue program where you can get ad revenue based on the number of views you get, or our support program, which is kind of like an altruistic crowdsourcing mechanism where your fans can tip you like through a microtransaction model to help support you. Our goal is really to figure out how do we create sustainable forms of revenue for such a new industry as webcomics.
Yeah, webcomics is one of those weird industries that just has a lot of history towards it. So it's sort of interesting to see certain new platforms such as yourself or such as Tapas come out there compared to say something like Comic Genesis or the Duck Comics.
Yeah, wow, I haven't heard those names in quite a while. Like the old school players, yeah, for sure. Amongst them are like Comics Fury, Smack Jeeves, I think is one of like the old guards for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the Duck Comics is sort of a rebranding of Drunk Duck, so they're still sort of going on. So, all right. So, what are some of the interesting stuff that you guys have got coming up?
So some more interesting things that we got coming up. Let's see. We just introduced a couple new genres on the platform. We introduced the LGBTQ plus genre as well as the GL genre. We're hoping to improve the genre system as a whole, allowing for readers and creators to better identify what they would be interested in. So, like, let's say you're a creator, right? And you're working on a story that isn't necessarily like beholden to fantasy. Like maybe it's like a fantasy romance story, but our current system only allows you to pick one genre. And sometimes that's not really indicative of what your story is really about, right? So we're trying to open that up to like a 2-genre system, to identification of what you might be interested in faster. That's like the main thing. I mean, we're always excited for the new creators and new stories that are debuting on the platform. We have some pretty exciting stories that are coming up later next quarter, I think. We have some pretty well-known community members that are making all new original stories with us, and we can't be more excited about that.
Okay. You have some partnerships with people with like Boom Studios, Vault Comics, and the Hatchet Book Group. How's that working out?
I think it's working out pretty well. I mean, I think in the early days of digital comics, there was like this kind of panic of, like digital creeping into like the physical format market and kind of being a disruptor. But, the more I've worked in webcomics, the more I see webcomics as like a supplementary tool for physical publishers, when we were talking to Boom, shout out to Philip over at Boom, who's like very progressive and forward thinking when it comes to digital. But when I was reading through their catalog, I really fell in love with Heavy Vinyl. It's a comic that was previously called Hi-Fi Fight Club, but I love the creative team. I love the voice they were able to capture, and I think their target market or their target demo for that story was probably like young millennial women readers. And I guess it's like kind of tough to reach those readers in a traditional brick and mortar store. So, it was really my goal when we were partnering with Boom to give that series really like a second wind, because so many of our readers are women and I thought that, heavy vinyl was like a perfect fit for our platform, for our audience. It also helped that the artist was a webcomic artist to begin with, so that aesthetic really lent itself to having like a really collaborative feel for like the Boom and Tapas experience. So yeah, I think it's working out. I think we're learning more and more about how to better help physical publishers reach new markets, reach new readers. And not only that, but our app makes content so much more accessible. So I think it's like a win-win across the board. And we're also learning a ton from their editorial teams over there as well. Yeah.
What kind of stuff are you learning from the editorial teams? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, so at Tapas, we're a startup. So the way that we do things is we try to experiment and try to figure things out on our own. And we thought we had digital publishing really figured out by the end of like year 5, I would say. But when talking to like physical publishers and learning more about how they structure their companies, like how they divide the different parts of editorial, whether it's like a team that is specifically dedicated to sourcing talent, a team that's dedicated specifically to marketing the work, a team that's dedicated to just a production schedule. Bifurcating all of these different roles, I think that we're learning a lot in terms of, okay, like we see the core strengths of what physical publishing does. How can we marry that with whatever we're already doing on digital?
How hard has that been to do? I mean, I know there's a lot of translation issues.
I would say that it's been an okay process so far, I think. I mean, one of the difficult challenges that we face in digital publication is the fact that there's so many stories. Like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, there are 70,000 stories on Tapas. I mean, that's a lot of stories to sort of parse through. To tell a story that stands out amongst those 70,000 stories is getting more and more difficult as the years go along, because I think creators are really getting a better grasp of how to tell a webcomic story or how to market a webcomic story. And so, learning how traditional publishers kind of like vet talent, or how traditional publishers identify like what's going to be next in the market has been like an eye-opening experience, I would say.
Yeah, I'll bet. I mean, it's just an entirely different situation.
Yeah, and it's also like, when you're working in print, you have to plan really far ahead, right? Like, you have to hit like a print deadline to get it to the printer on time. And if the printer doesn't get it on time, that derails like the shipping schedule. And then if the shipping schedule is pushed back, then, the marketing falls apart. So, we're learning so much about how to plan further ahead in the timeline in order to like better cater to the readers that already exist.
Yeah, I mean, I know DC, for example, was trying to get into the webcomics market a while back, but eventually their Zudu project eventually failed.
Yeah, I think it's tough. Publishing traditional comics and just reformatting it for the mobile experience might not be like the best way to go about things. I think you really have to look at who are the webcomic readers, what are they really enjoying or responding to, and how do we maybe recontextualize these heroes, like if we're talking about DC, to fit that audience a little bit better. I think that would probably be like the best strategy to go about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really weird stuff when DC was trying to get into webcomics that popped up. Definitely would not have been part of the normal DC brand.
No.
All right, how did you have some sort of incubation initiative?
Yeah, so we have like we have a couple different types of stories that we try to tell on Tapas. We have the open publishing platform where anyone can publish, and then we have this what we call the premium program, which is basically putting a series behind a paywall that utilizes like microtransactions. So our goal is never to lock a reader out of the reading experience. Our goal is just figure out better ways for readers to help support their favorite creators. And within that premium lineup, we have what we call Tapas Originals. So that's kind of, I think, what we're talking about. And we're developing new original stories with all of our fan favorite community creators and really working with them at the beginning to develop the stories from the ground up. Our goal is to help those creators navigate like business development, ancillary deals, publishing, even building art teams around them so that we can make sure that creators don't burn out, which is like a very common thing in webcomics. Like the Originals program, the goal is to alleviate any type of stress involved with storytelling and to allow the creators to focus on doing what they love most, which is just telling their stories.
Just to clarify something I heard, you have some way of linking artists together as far as like say a writer and an illustrator?
Yeah, it depends. So for the premium or originals, we definitely do help creators find one another. For instance, we did a project called Cheshire Crossing with Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian. Andy wasn't really interested in drawing a comic, but definitely interested in writing a comic. So we found Sarah Anderson. I mean, Sarah Anderson is already a massively popular webcomic creator. But yeah, we paired those two together. So we do that from time to time.
That'd be sort of interesting to see somebody actually make part of their platform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of difficulty. I would say that there is a lot more writers looking for artists than there are artists looking for writers, if that makes sense. A lot of times in webcomics, the writer and artist is typically like one person. We see this a lot with the creator community. So having a platform that kind of caters to matchmaking artists and writers would be an interesting exploration for sure down the road.
Yeah, I know a lot of people would be interested in it. So, if you were interested in becoming a comic creator, what would be a great way to actually start going at it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's see. Well, I think the first thing to do is really figure out what you want to do and accomplish like creatively with the story. A lot of times when we're talking to like first time creators, they really want to tell like their magnum opus, like their 10-year epic adventure. And if it's your first time doing a web comic or even like a web novel, we typically try to tell creators, you should start off a little bit smaller, really figure out how the craft functions by just doing it. But probably the most important step along the process is actually just publishing. So many times we meet creators who make a series on Tapas but never go on to publishing their first episode. So I would say, I think like anywhere from like 10 to 15% of creators do that. So just having an episode out there and taking that first leap into the market is incredibly important, I think. And just publishing at a consistent schedule, interacting with your fans is so important, especially in digital comics. I think those would be like my biggest recommendations if you're just dipping your toe into the space, like managing expectations, really identifying what you want to accomplish creatively, putting yourself out there, publishing consistently, and also just engaging with your fans.
Any way to overcome the introverted writer problem? Because that's obviously going to be an issue here.
Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
A lot of writers tend to be introverts. That is, they tend to not like having to deal with public. They want to basically just hide themselves off, and that's it. However, as you've noted, you've got to interact with people to at least some degree in order to become popular.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, if you're an introverted creator, I don't think that's necessarily a problem. Again, like it's recommended that you interact with your fans, but it's not totally necessary. There are stories on Tapas where creators don't necessarily interact. There's a really popular series called They Say I Was Born a King's Daughter, and the fans just keep coming back because the story is so engaging, and the creator doesn't necessarily pop into the comment section to respond. So I think it's still a viable strategy to just publish your story, and if it's engaging enough, narratively, then people will keep coming back. You don't necessarily need to force yourself to interact with the creator or reader community. So it's totally fine if you feel like you're introverted and don't want to focus your energy or efforts in that place.
How important would basically be the notes that accompany some of the comics be?
Oh wait, can you repeat that? Sorry.
With a lot of your comics, there's obviously a point where the creators are going to be able to leave notes. This is why I did this, or this is where I had a little bit of fun, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. How does that help with the interaction?
Yeah, I think that, let's see. So when I was growing up, before webcomics was really a solidified thing, I would have to travel hours and hours to go to a convention to maybe get a few minutes to talk to my favorite creators. In digital, whether the creators are on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, they've made themselves a lot more accessible. And I think having that type of personality that readers can connect to and really root for is pretty cool. On Tapas, you can leave a little author's or creator's note at the end of every episode to clarify things or to give them a heads up on upcoming events that they might be attending, or maybe even be hey, there's going to be some delays, or maybe I've been really looking forward to revealing this twist in the story and this is why I did it. I think those are all really fun things that really add to the narrative experience that you can't typically get, I guess, with a physical book, unless you're adding footnotes or something, like a David Foster Wallace. But yeah, I think that's a really cool way to interact with your fans for sure.
What other ways would you suggest a comic creator market themselves?
Yeah, I don't think there's really any wrong way to go about it. Making sure that whatever the social media strategy might be, but making sure that it feels authentic and honest, I think, is the best way to go about it. Other than that, engaging with other creators, I find to be super helpful. I want to definitely create a creator community where creators feel like they can support one another in this creative endeavor. I think that's really awesome. A weird suggestion I would say is to draw your original characters mashed up with some other properties like fan art. I think that goes a long way in terms of finding an audience that's already engaged with a popular property and kind of getting them to take a peek at what you're doing. I think that's always helpful and always interesting and cool, as long as it makes sense in terms of demographic overlap. I think that's always something that's highly recommended.
I don't know. I think if I would do that, I'd be doing the exact opposite. I'd basically be finding a genre that has absolutely nothing. I'd be finding a genre that has absolutely nothing to do with my area and just simply go for it.
Interesting. I guess my question would be why would you approach it in that way?
First off, to basically mess around with the archetypes of the other genre as well, to establish your own archetypes in your own comic, and therefore establish a sense of familiarity. I just point out you see this a lot in the anime itself. You see stuff like people going to conventions and they'll be a real hardcore sci-fi character, and all of a sudden you'll see them dressed up as, say, a fantasy character.
Yeah.
And we won't talk about the the Voltron episode that pretty much everybody loves, where it was just everybody having fun in a D&D setting.
Yeah. I would say those are tangentially related. I think that there are definitely demographic overlaps within those mashups. So yeah, if you can find common ground, I definitely recommend
it. When it comes to Tapas, what else are you doing for the creators? I mean, besides occasionally doing the mashups, allowing them the microtransactions, as well as the advertising, anything else you're doing to make the life of a creator a little bit easier?
Yeah, we try to do everything possible to help creators. I mean, that's kind of the core focus of the company, We're trying to create better recommendation systems, creating more avenues for newer creators to be discovered on the front page. We're trying to create a better search mechanism so that people can find relevant comics or novels that they're interested in faster. We're creating even more premium programs for creators to get involved in, to hopefully make creating comics or novels a full-time thing for more people. I think you can there's like a finite number of people that work in comics to begin with, and to just expand that pool a little bit more, to give more power to maybe some voices that aren't heard as often. I think that's like kind of like where we want to focus a lot of our resources at this point.
On top of that, you guys do anything like classes or anything like that, or offer workshops up for creators?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that we want to explore down the road. I think currently we typically go to colleges, we host seminars, we talk to students to sort of showcase like what they can do in the field. In terms of like classes or online things, we haven't really dive too deeply into that, but that's definitely something that we've been cognizant of, and we would love to explore more of. If your fans are interested in learning more about how to make web comics, I recommend Walter Osley's YouTube series. I think he's doing like a really great job at giving information and making it super accessible and easy to digest on how to make web comics. So yeah, for sure.
When it comes down to how much fun can I have with the Tapas format, I mean, there's always the infinite canvas, for example, from Scott McCloud. That would be sort of interesting to pursue.
Yeah, I believe you can upload up to 40 images. Each image can be up to 4,000 pixels. So we definitely agree with Scott McCloud. The infinite canvas is totally cool to explore. I think it's really fun, and we're seeing a lot more creators tinker, experiment, and innovate in that space. So yeah, we always encourage creators to take a look at, like what technology is available on Tapas and try to push it to its absolute limits.
Admittedly, there are some formats I'd like to see not show up again, like the time when a lot of webcomics were trying the animated GIFs, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Basically do like a rain effect or something like that. Sometimes it worked, but usually it just came off as sort of weird.
Interesting. Yeah. I think it depends on what the series is. Like, does it demand animated GIFs? Like, what does it add to the reader experience? I think these are all interesting questions to explore on the creator side.
What was the idea behind, straight up, what was the history of Tapas? How did it come about, and what's the basic origins of it?
Yeah, so this is like the brainchild of our CEO, Chang Kim. His background is creating amazing tech platforms. So he had to start in Blogger, which was sold to Google, and he like grew up in South Korea and was seeing like this proliferation of webcomics in Asia, and how digestible and easy to access it was, and how it was empowering creators. And he was really inspired to sort of start that movement in the West. And so he started Tapas, formerly Tapastic, as an open publishing platform. And over the course of these past years has been really focusing on how do we bring more tools to help more creators succeed, and how do we make comics more accessible to more readers. And we've just been, really focusing on supporting the creator community, growing the creator community out. When I first joined Tapas, we had 8 creators on the platform, and now we have over 50,000. So yeah, we've come a long way, but our origins start from, Chang's vision in terms of like, how do we make comics more accessible? How do we make comics more easy to make, easy to publish, easy to distribute? And how do we make the creator's life a lot more focused on doing what they love, which is telling stories? And how do we sort of take all the busy work, like creating your own website and like creating an RSS feed, finding readers, a little bit easier on them?
Okay. How hard would it be to make an outgoing link from a Tapas comp to, say, a merch site or to Amazon?
Super easy, barely an inconvenience. You can create a custom series ad which will appear on your series page, which can link to anything, and the ad unit can look like anything that you want. So you can totally link it to like your merch store, to like a Patreon, to your social media, to I think I've seen some creators link it to other creators that they want to support, which is like totally rad. So super easy. We really want to make sure that, your Tapas experience really caters to what you want to accomplish. If you want your readers to check out your merch, there are definitely tools made easily accessible for you to accomplish that.
That'd be great. I mean, it's really great, especially with characters you're trying to start off a Kickstarter, get more people for their Patreon page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And just because it's a fun topic to explore, what kind of merch do you suggest creators actually pursue?
Well, let's see. It depends. It depends how much time you have, to be honest. I always recommend creators start off with prints. I think prints are, for starters, they're easy to make, relatively easy to make. The profit margins are really, really good, especially if you're printing in bulk. But if you're going to conventions, I think, and this does take a lot of time and a lot of coordination, but like enamel pins, I'm in love with enamel pins. I think it's like one of the coolest pieces of merch to pick up because you can kind of wear it and kind of, like whenever anyone asks me, like I wear a denim jacket all the time with a lot of creators' pins on it, and whenever someone asks me, oh, where did I get it from? I get to kind of promote my favorite creators, which is always rad. When you own like maybe a poster, it's kind of like up in your room, and unless people are coming over to your room, they're never really going to see how cool those prints are. But enamel pins are like kind of like a cool way to support your favorite creators. I think that's really rad. T-shirts, I guess, is also like another viable approach. I think just handling t-shirts is a little bit difficult. Like they take up a lot of space. It's kind of hard to transport. The profit margins aren't always the best. So yeah, I would definitely recommend prints to start off. And if you're feeling a bit adventurous, enamel pins, highly recommended.
How do you feel about print-on-demand type situations as far as books and merch go?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's viable, especially if you're a creator that's doing this as like a second job or like as a hobby, and you might have like your day job that takes a lot of time. Print-on-demand solutions are great, for those purposes. Especially if the print-on-demand services handle like the fulfillment, like the shipping. Like shipping is an absolute nightmare for a lot of creators, for me personally too. So if it alleviates any of that stress and you're okay with like less of a profit margin, it's totally a viable approach.
Yeah, I pointed this out because some of my favorite sites like Zazzle and Cafe Press not only do the print-on-demand stuff, but they also take care of all the fulfillment as well as the ordering issues as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's basically you just go to the site, create something, slap your brand on something, and then just advertise that you're selling it.
Yeah.
And they handle virtually everything else on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of fun when you start looking at some of the enamel pin problems, however.
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Some of the print-on-demand sites handle their enamel pins a little bit weird. When most people think enamel pins are basically looking like cutouts, basically of the characters or whatever you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas some of the print-on-demand sites tend towards like just squares and circles, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the die cut stuff a little bit better. I think it's a more interesting silhouette, but like whatever works for the creator, I think that's definitely the route to pursue, whether you want die cut or maybe like standard shapes, whatever looks good and whatever makes the creator happy.
All right, so where do you see webcomics going? What kind of trends do you see coming up?
Trends in the webcomic space, more diversity. I think that's always one of the most beautiful aspects of webcomics and web novels. More diverse voices. The quality of the storytelling, of the art, of the language has always been improving year after year. I think that is going to be more and more difficult to distinguish, quote unquote, professional creators from like first-time creators or hobbyists. I think that's a trend that we're really looking forward to. I mean, a lot of these creators are super young and ridiculously talented. There's so much information out there to help you improve your craft, and I think that's what we're most excited about. You know, it's like when you take away the gatekeepers for publishing, what are you going to find? You're going to find like a whole new landscape of storytelling. So yeah, I would say what's on the horizon for webcomics is overall improvement in quality, as well as a diversification for the voices and characters that are going to be represented in our space.
Any other type of genres you see becoming popular?
I mean, I'm hoping that more fringe genres start to pick up in the webcomic space. I think it would kind of be a shame if webcomics mirrored like pop culture too much. You know, like I think because you're only limited to what you can write and what you can draw and what you can imagine in the webcomic and web novel world, it kind of behooves us to try to experiment and to sort of marry and mash up genres as much as possible, you know? So I'm hoping like weird fiction takes off a little bit more. I'm hoping that more eclectic genre mashups take off a bit more. I think that would be really, really rad.
Yeah, I strangely think that if you could basically figure out a way to go with more of a keyword type situation rather than a straight one or two genres, I think that might actually help in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I mean, we've been experimenting a lot in that regards. Like, we have a genre, you know, like, I guess a perfect example is like LGBTQ plus as a genre. You know, I don't think that's like traditionally a entertainment genre, I would say. Like, if I were to ask you, like, what stories come to mind when you think of LGBTQ plus, it's kind of hard to define, right? Like, would you say, oh, comedy series, drama series, fantasy series, like, which are, you know, those three genres are more traditional genre definitions, right? So as we explore new genres or new types of stories, I think that we will be introducing more nuanced keywords for sure.
I mean, definitely think of stories that are more for the LGBT community, such as Lumberjanes or the Young Defenders.
Mm-hmm.
But again, those tend to go back under other genres.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I think, yeah, I totally agree. And that's kind of like why we felt the necessity to start introducing like multiple genres per series to better like define or to better explain to a reader like what they're going to be getting into.
And it doesn't help that when you start looking at a lot of webcomics, you start seeing a lot of just simply weirdness when it comes to, you know, a lot of them don't quite fit in just one particular genre all that well.
Yeah, and it's also one of those things where, you know, we've seen a couple times where a story will evolve in terms of its genre definition. So like it'll start off as like an action comedy and then gradually evolve into a mystery romance. So like how do you adequately like capture that within like standard genre definitions, right? So I think we're trying to explore that as well more and more as we go along.
That would definitely be worth it. I mean, you even see it when it comes to straight anime. Mm-hmm. My personal favorite right now has got to be Gurren Lagann, which started off as basically a straight shonen series, and then went basically space opera at one point.
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right. So, any particular education or any type of classes you expect for a webcomic creator to take on?
That's a great question. Not really, I would say. I mean, I think that I'm more excited to see what new creators have to say in our space. You know, creators that aren't beholden to traditional comics or traditional means of comics production. You know, I think some of the most exciting stuff that we've seen on Tapas are from first-time creators who might not have known a whole lot about comics to begin with, but because they didn't know, they broke all the rules and created something more nuanced and exciting and fresh. So I don't really have any strong recommendations for education other than like the Walter Osley YouTube series that he's doing. I think that stuff is just great in general. So yeah.
Okay. All right. So any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Like, if you're a creator that's wanting to get into the space, now is the best time to do it. Digital publishing has never been easier. There's more readers than ever. And if you're a reader that wants to explore stories that you can't find anywhere else, please do give us a try. We're at tapas.io. You can find us on the app stores, whether it's iOS or Android. There's something for everyone, and I hope that there is everything to someone on here. So yeah, I guess those are like my final thoughts. I really appreciate you having me on your podcast. I had a ton of fun talking about all this stuff, and hope I can be back for more later on.
Probably something. We'll see what happens in about 6 months. See how Tapas is going.
Mm-hmm.
It would definitely be interesting to check in every so often, just see what's going on with the site.
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right, I guess that's basically it.
Cool.
This episode of Webcomics Reviews and Interviews is brought to you by Podfaves.com. You love podcasts, but it's hard finding that next bingeable show. Podfaves has taken out the guesswork by easily identifying the best podcasts out there, so you can spend less time searching and more time listening. That's PODFAVS.com. And that's our show. For those interested in supporting the show, check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/twosparrows, TWO. It features minicasts, the next episode, and unedited interviews, and I'm working on transcripts of the various shows. We also have an Alexis app offering 2-minute minicasts offering writing and business tips, as well as affirmations to keep you writing. We also have curated playlists on YouTube, with all the shows broken down to different playlists based on topic. It also includes a good part of available minicasts, as well as the Alexis briefs. So please support our Patreon page, download the Alexis app, and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and please talk to us on Facebook. Thank you, and have a great day.